David, and I'm here with Lark in the Morning to talk about one of our 5-key old-style flutes. Before the invention of the modern Bame flute, which most of us see in band instruments, the typical metal flute, a lot of people call a silver flute, the classical musicians used other instruments that used a simpler system design. By simple system, they meant that these 6 finger holes played a basic major scale, like this, just going up. Now, for a while, the flutes were designed in such a way that using combinations of fingers, you could get the other notes, the chromatics that filled in the scale. But as music got more complicated, say around 1800, the flute makers decided, well, we should start adding keywork to fill this in. And this particular flute is modeled after an English block-mounted, large bore, large tone hole, a 5-key flute. Typically a Pratten-type bore and design, which gives you a fairly large sound. It's very favored in the Irish and other folk flute worlds. And it's also quite good flute for playing period music, other styles, and anything where you would want the wooden flute tone and this type of fingering system. So, just to give you an idea of how the chromatics work on this, for anyone who plays modern flute, the D note is the same. These 2 holes originally on many of the flutes did have keywork and would be the low C sharp and low C notes. But in most of the modern flutes like this, they don't use those particular notes. But they will leave sometimes the holes there because of it affects the acoustics of the bore. So the D note is the same, the E flat note is the same, the E note is the same. You differ on the F. What would be an F on a modern flute gives you an F sharp on this one, and the F would be the use of either the short F key here or the long F key available right behind here with a little finger on the left hand. So that's the F sharp. The G is the same as on a modern flute. So is the G sharp. So is the A. The B flat is different. It's the thumb key under here. The B natural is the same. And on this particular flute, you have a number of options for fingering the C natural note. The most common being either, in this octave, either being 1 and 2 or 1 and 2. The C sharp is all open, and then you repeat the D note and the rest of the scale going up with overblowing pressure and venting notes. When you get to the very top of the flute, there's a few additional fingerings for high notes. That's best learned from fingering charts and from checking with your particular flute which ones work best. A typical 5 to 8 key flute fingering chart may give 3 to 8 options and more for certain notes the higher up you go in pitch. So to give you an idea of what the keywork can do, I'm going to play just a very simple major key sort of passage, and then do it in minor. With the keywork, though, you could easily get So it gives you options that, of playing different types of tunes in different keys, different scales. Most of the people using these type of instruments now play Irish or other types of Celtic and folk music where they would typically be focusing a lot on the very lowest notes. The pitch is down there. And up into register. Although the flute maker who did this didn't really design it as such, there's enough of the original classical flute left into it that you still do have a pretty good upper range left. Okay, so it pretty much only goes up to the A really accurately, but it's still pretty high. So it gives you 2.5 octaves of range on this particular instrument. There's a tuning slide on this design. The tuning slide allows you to change the pitch up and down a little bit to adapt to which particular other instruments that you're playing with. So you're playing at a place with a piano, there's a little flat you can pull out. In this end of the instrument there's a cork adjustment kind of in, I don't know if you can see it really well, but inside of this hole between the blowhole and here, the embouchure hole and the end of the flute, there's a piece of cork that seals up the end of the tube. And you need to adjust that to make sure that the octaves are true. If the one octave is sharper compared to the other or flatter compared to the other, you can adjust the cork back and forth to make that work. The wooden flute, of course, would need to be oiled, particularly during a break-in period. A new flute, you'd want to oil the inside of the flute with something like sweet almond oil or typical woodwind boar oil before you play it, and probably only play it about 15 minutes a day for the first week, and make sure you dry it out thoroughly in between. Then you can add the next week another 15 minutes or so, the next week another 15 minutes. So by the fourth week you're playing about an hour a day. And pretty much after that you'll have broken it in really well and cracks will be minimal. Although even on the antique flutes I've seen, because of the design of a metal-lined head joint with a wooden overlay on it, there often are cracks that develop in this section of the flute. Usually a little super glue or some other good glue will seal the crack, and then you're good to go. An early 1900s Sears Roebuck catalog talked about wooden flutes and said that the wooden flute is an instrument that when you buy it, you buy the crack, but the crack doesn't arrive until later. So I have almost yet to see a flute that's over 100 years old that has not had some sort of repair work done on the head joint. I think the problem is because the inside of these flutes are lined on the head joint with metal, and the outside is still the basic wood. The head joint meaning only this section of it. That as the metal expands and contracts, the wood expands and contracts at a different rate. And that's, I think, what helps contribute to that particular factor. Other than that, you just want to keep it clean, keep it, wipe it out after every use. The tenon joints that hold the sections together, in this case, are thread wrapped. Sometimes they're cork, sometimes they're wrapped with other materials. You want to put a little bit of grease on that, and depending upon your climate you may need to take a few wrappings on or off to make the joint snug but not too snug. And if you ignore the finger keys, it basically functions as a keyless Irish flute or with the same basic fingering as a low D whistle. Anyway, thank you, and hope you enjoy this little bit of introduction to the 5-key flute.